Good evening, everyone. Let others join in the meanwhile, so we can get started in the meanwhile, so that we don't lose time to avail ma'am's expertise here. Welcome all everyone to this session of Vartalap. That is the second session in the series. Let me give a quick introduction about ma'am. Dr. Indumathi Rao, if I go to introduce her, it will take a whole lot of hours and hours, but then I will just give a brief introduction of ma'am to you all. Dr. Indumathi Rao is founder and regional coordinator and advisor of the community-based rehabilitation network that is called CBR that works in 8 South Asian countries. Ma'am has contributed widely and in-depth towards building the movement for inclusion of children, adults, and senior citizens with diverse needs across the country and South Asia. She has founded and led many organizations, including Nivedita Shishu Kendra, Nivedita Manovikas Kendra, Seva in Action, other than CBR. The main focus of ma'am's work has been inclusive development of all, especially the most disadvantaged due to disability, aging, and poverty. She is currently also the chairperson of the Global Partnership for Disability Movement, the vice chairperson for the National Bal Bhavan, and member of the Niti Aayog Disability Group. She is a member of various committees in the area of disabilities, women's studies, and child rights. Dr. Rao has published several papers, initiated and implemented research projects, put out videos and lectures and more on the subject of inclusion of people with diverse needs. And very interesting part of the character of ma'am I would like to share with you all. She passionately works with earth and grow fruits, vegetables, herbs in her farm off Magadhi Road, Bangalore. Ma'am, I can go on and on. There is no stop to it, but over to you, ma'am. We are all waiting to engage with you in the discussion and avail the benefits of your expertise. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Professor Maithili and Sir Gomati, for this opportunity. Am I audible? Can you all hear me well?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, you are audible.
It is really a great opportunity for two reasons, because Tata Institute of Social Sciences brings a lot of a new change in the way we think about multiple issues concerning education, social work, and there are no areas which the founders of Tata's have not touched. So the recent has been taking over back Indian Airlines, Air India, and we are all looking forward to fly again. So that is the Tata's touch. So I'm very happy to be here. And I was just discussing with Professor Maithili and Gomati, instead of just talking to people with whatever little I know on inclusive education, I thought we should open up this session to learn from each other. I hope you all agree with me that the more we know, the more we come to know how little we know. So it's very important for us to constantly on the learning mode, so that we learn and we open our mind, intellect, and intent to learn new things from everyone. So before I go ahead, I would like to just do some thought provoking. So just keep thinking about it. And when you, whatever comes to your mind, I really request and appreciate if you can put it in the chat box and share it with me when we open for the discussion after my very brief presentation. So I don't want to do a formal presentation. So I will go with a very brief one and then we go for a discussion. So anything on earth related to inclusive education, let us do brainstorming. So whatever I know, I'll share. Whatever I don't know, together we can explore. I just want to show you this picture, which is very common. So this is the status of inclusive education, I would say, in most of the countries, because with a little global knowledge what I have, no country can really claim that they have reached the true spirit of equity and inclusion. So by and large, the more we go to countries where there are medium resources, we see a lot of things that happens in the form of fair justice, rights, and inclusion. And just I feel the status of inclusive education at present is very similar to this race. So, what is fair? What is equity? Is a very big issue, because in a country where we have several disadvantaged groups, so it is not just people with disabilities. We have girls, we have scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, we have transgender, we have children living in difficult circumstances, we have children living in conflict areas. I can go on and on. And when we look at all these groups, we really see that the the kind of fairness that should be there in education has not reached the grassroots level for various reasons. And those reasons could be related to policies or practices, or gaps between policies and practices, or sometimes even the intent may not be that clear the way we want it to be. So, why we are talking of equity in a session on inclusive education? See, equity is so important when you read, say, a new education policy. Equity is so important. See, if we expect all children or to wear a garment and expect the child to fit into the garment, like we do when we go to a ready-made shop and buy something. It could be small, large, or extra large, and we try to fit into the dress. But when we talk about equity, it is like a tailor-made garment. I always compare the blouse stitched for women. It is very difficult to be a lady's tailor. We really make his life miserable with 101 specifications, because it has to be the right for the wearer. So equity really talks about that. So if we are looking at that kind of tailor-made, need-based, child-centered education system, just think about it, whether we have right now, do we have that, or what is that we need to do in order to make it really child-centered so that it meets the requirement of every child. I just have few questions. See, it is very easy for people, the government, because the government goes and signs the international commitments, declarations, because it's very easy to do that. But when it comes to, say, implementing the commitment or translating the commitment into action, just mere slogans will not help. Inclusive education, according to me, is one such slogan which has started without much preparation. And we see a lot of uh, issues, and we have a lot of questions, and sometimes we feel that the whole business of inclusive education can be a very big failure at the grassroots level, that is at the classroom level. So, do you really think inclusive classrooms can benefit all learners? If yes, how? If no, why not? Just think about it. Teachers' perspectives and beliefs. Many teachers, they say that, ma'am, we the so-called normal children, they do not learn. So how do you expect a child who cannot see, who cannot understand, who cannot hear, can learn in the classroom? So this is uh, the doubt or of a teacher. One may call it as lack of confidence or lack of skills, but in reality, most teachers in the rural schools, they really feel that they are not really uh, capable of addressing the needs of all children with such a diverse needs within the class. So they have this doubt which is there in the mind. So given that with all the policies, whether it is IEDC scheme or Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan or IEDSS, now Samagra Shiksha, NEP, so they are all on paper. No? Whether it is possible to really take the inclusive education in the schools, especially in the rural and tribal and remote areas, where we all know the kind of schools we have. It could be a single teacher school or a school with hardly nothing but a chalk and a talk facility. So, how do we really practice, say, inclusive classroom in such an environment is a challenge, and we need to address those questions. The third one, as I said, it is a common thing when with my interaction with teachers, they say that normal children are not learning at respective grade levels. Studies like by Pratham and all shows that majority of children are not learning at the grade level. If that is the case, if that is the case, are we ready to include children from socially, economically disadvantaged section and put them into the same schools and expect them to fulfill their right to education is the third doubt. And of course, UNESCO, United Nations, if you see the Salamanca Declaration and the UNESCO research on Classroom for All, it says that inclusive education is win-win. It all sounds very good to hear. It's a win-win. It is going to benefit all children, and all practices in inclusive classroom is meant for all children. So every child would benefit from the inclusive practices. It's a statement, but have you seen that happening? And given the quality of teacher training, this is we have now history, pre-NEP history, where we have 2 years B.Ed program. Earlier, it was even 1 year. So, with the kind of teacher training and the curriculum in teacher training, whether it is possible to create for teachers to create a classroom for all children with the level of the competency what they have is the fifth doubts. So there are so many doubts I'm raising. Some of these doubts must be also there on your minds. So let us try to find that they are not baseless. All these doubts are based on the actual field work which people like me have are engaged. So it is a huge challenge. So what is that? What is that we can one can take if you can suggest something for everyone, including the government, how to really make an inclusive school. So, our teachers and schools, what kind of changes we need to bring, and some of the regulatory bodies. It could be statutory bodies like NCT, RCI, or boards like CBSC, NIOS. How they should change if we really have to bring in inclusive education in the way it means and in the way to achieve the goals of equity. So there are many issues when we talk about inclusion of children with disabilities in particular, though inclusive education is not meant for only for children with disabilities, a whole lot of benchmark disability and issue of disability cards and including only children with benchmark disability and giving them accommodations and facilities only to benchmark disability and children without benchmark disabilities hardly get any support. What kind of inclusion we can achieve is another question. What is the role of corporate civil societies, families, people with disabilities in developing a classroom for all? What should change in the government, private schools, state education departments, SCRTs, universities, Ministry of Education, Finance Ministry, Ministry of Disability Affairs, what they need to do in order to really help the society to move on the path of developing a education system, a ecosystem which is beneficial for all children. I just request if anyone wants to say anything on this, on these doubts what I have raised. If you keep quiet, either you agree with me or you don't agree with me at all. So I don't feel motivated.
I think, no, I think what you're saying is very correct. I think what you said about inclusive education being brought about, just as a slogan and just, talked about is not the solution. There are many, many, many changes that need to be brought about, like even in a normal classroom setup, where there is, forget hearing impaired, visual impaired, just pure LD or, mild ADHD. Even to include those in a normal setup sometimes becomes a challenge. So, just saying that, inclusive education has to be implemented and stuff does not solve anything. I agree with that.
So why are we say discussing this? If it is not possible, then we should
No,
close.
no, I don't think it's not possible. But I think for one, teachers, when they go through their training, the training has to be much more intense than it actually is. And everybody has to be given some kind of, window into special education, all kinds of disabilities. All that has to be primed and prepped before they take on even like a normal classroom setup. So that they have some background knowledge of what to do or what these disabilities are. So I think that could be the first step.
I'm surprised, like the moment we use the term inclusive education, especially I have seen in India, we think of only say children with disabilities.
Hmm. Yes.
Is not is not about children with disabilities. So, inclusive education, when we are talking about all children, whether they are disadvantaged or advantaged, and all children, and there we say that it would include, just to give a focus, say it would include to bring in those who are conventionally have stayed outside the school system. So it is not. In fact, it is not meant for children with disabilities. And the moment we take that approach that it is for children with disabilities, a lot can go wrong in inclusive education. I will explain why, and I will also justify why I am saying this. Because if we, there is a very popular saying that a professor who shines in a faculty party can be very stupid in a dinner party. Why? It's because though it is very ideal to have the so-called normal, to have the development, a holistic development in all domains. In reality, there is no one who is perfect, perhaps except God, because I have not seen him and I have not assessed him, so I would presume that he is perfect. But uh, every child, every person on earth will have some kind of say, special need or a diverse need, and diverse need is more a rule rather than exception. The so-called normal doesn't exist. Why we refer to say children as normal or school as normal school? No, it really it doesn't exist at all. No, it is not there. At least it's not there on this planet. Maybe it is there somewhere else, but no one is so-called normal, and every child is unique in terms of potential inherent and in terms of pace of learning. So there are no two children who are same, and every classroom is already inclusive, whether we want it or not. Either children are included by default or by design. With education for all and enrollment retention policies, we see children with diverse needs already in classroom. In fact, every classroom is a is a collective group of children with diverse needs. No two children are same. I don't know whether you agree with me or not, but that is what the science says. That every child is unique in terms of pace of learning and in terms of potential inherent. So if that is the case, then we are asking here we are really looking at a teacher who can meet the diverse needs of all children. So she has only two approaches. One is to see that every child and follow the child, that either the child follows teacher or the teacher follows the child. For her to move toward on inclusive education path, she just need to take a very simple decision that I will not ask the child to follow me, but I will follow the child. So whether this is followed by teachers, whether the training what is being given, whether it gives this attitude to teachers is the question. So that just keep thinking about it, because this session I don't want to come with any answers, but it is $1 million question. What we have is whether a teacher-centered teacher training curriculum, a teacher-centered school, a teacher-centered classroom, whether it can ever become an inclusive classroom. It cannot. The science of inclusion says it cannot. So what we should do, I think the answer is something which we have to really look at it. Let us look at new education policy. NEP is seen as it has a lot of controversies, and people also see this as a ray of hope for many reasons. I would really, I would feel that NEP is very good for two reasons. One is it has included early childhood education as an integral part of education system, because anything anything and everything was happening in the name of early childhood care education in India. So there was no accountability, there were no outcomes, and teachers were trained or not trained, or well trained or badly trained, and the whole lot of services that was given under say early childhood care education. We have a lot of issues whether it really led to helping a child to have a firm foundation during the fundamental period. So now NEP talks about early childhood care education in the chapter 1. I feel there are possibilities. I am not saying that is a guarantee that early childhood care education becomes more accountable to the child and the parents in future. It should happen. So let us hope something like that happens. Let us look at what the NEP really talks about on inclusive education. So I'm sure that you all have read NEP. How many of you have seen NEP? Anyone? Yeah, okay, yes. What is that you like about NEP? Yeah.
Yeah, good evening, ma'am.
What is that you like about NEP?
So this NEP 2020 is focusing on the cognitive development, the character building, and this developing the skills, various skills in the students through the inclusion of a vocational subject and other subjects with the integration of mainstream subjects with the classroom in the classroom.
Very good, very good. Yeah. It really talks about skill development, like you said, vocational. So that is a very valuable addition in NEP. Any other participant would like to say what you like about NEP, or what you don't like about NEP?
Good afternoon, ma'am. I am Sri Devi from Gandhigram Rural University, Dindikkal. Actually, I need some clarification, or I have a doubt. You were talking about the inclusive education. Actually, I am working on the tribal girls, working on the field of tribal girls. One of my scholars is still, she is working for that. And she actually used to share her experience when she went for the data collection and all. She still finds that the tribal girl children are not coming into the mainstream itself, even before this NEP 2020. I'm just wondering how this NEP 2020 is going to make them, even this COVID period has made them to get more dropouts rather than having more enrollment. So how this NEP 2020 is going to make up all these things to the tribal people like them? Because mainly the tribal girl children are not given the proper opportunity of going to the schools. So I'm just wondering how this NEP is going to give that way for those children to come into the mainstream. That is what is a very big question before me. So I just want to ask you, ma'am, what is your view about this?
Very valid question. I would say like NEP is like having a Google map, okay, and sitting in the car. If you don't start the car and if you don't press the throttle and if they don't fill the tank, if it doesn't move, just having a Google map and the car will not ensure that anything will happen. Nothing will happen. NEP is like a Google map. Okay, it can show us direction, but if we don't move, if we don't start, using the map, then map alone is it's useless. So NEP will be absolutely useless if we don't pump in all other factors. Like I was talking about having gears, having brakes, having your fuel tank filled. You need a skilled driver. You need a proper mechanic if something goes wrong. All that has to go along with NEP. Otherwise, it won't work.
No, I'm not talking only on NEP, ma'am. Even before what are all the schemes that our government has initiated for the development of the tribal children has not yet reached the tribal people till now. Then if it is the case, then how this NEP will reach them? As you said, the car without the driver and the skilled person, even the earlier schemes has not yet reached them. That is the real ground reality we are facing when we enter into the field.
Theoretically, I can say earlier we never had a policy. Until the 1986 education policy, it was a framework, but there was no stock taking of the existing education system and moving ahead. That kind of exercise had not happened. But whatever they did, whatever measures they did, why it did not work? I would say in a very simple way, it was not planned properly. So anything, even at home, if you want to do something, unless you plan it, you can't say guarantee the results.
Yes.
So just having a bad plan and expecting that to work, that is why the proof of the pudding is in its eating. If something has not worked in scaling up educational rights of tribal children, it says that whatever they have done, it was a bad plan or a bad implementation.
Yeah, I should also accept your view, ma'am, because implementation is a little bit a tough task. When we approach the administrators or the those who are in the authority, they are also not very much cooperative. We are not able to reach them easily. That is again a problem. As teacher educators and from the teacher education field, we are still going for a survey and we are just getting the data and we are just giving the data as they are they are like this and they are like this. Yeah, we are just giving the statement alone. We are not in the position to work for them in the field. That is what is the major difficult that we are facing while we are doing all these researches and all. Because as a researcher, we want to implement the results and we want to apply the results in the field and we want to have that development. That part is a little bit lagging on, ma'am. That is what is.
Public policy is a path-finding effort. Without knowing where we want to reach, a vision, and what is that we want to reach, and how do we know when we reach there, indicators and the sources to and support system to reach the translate the vision into action. If it is all there, not there, then just writing a very beautiful policy is the easiest thing. Like if they people like me, we can write a policy, very colorful policy, which will promise everything. But in reality, it is not going to deliver.
Yes. So the policy makers can keep in mind the way of implementing that and make it very easy for the grassroots level people also to access all these facilities. So
Yeah, but
collaborative work will be.
who are the implementers? Because when we look at education, if you see the Indian Constitution, it is a concurrent subject. Okay. Of course, when I talk about disability, it is the state subject, and it is listed as a Panchayat Raj subject. It is a subject that belongs to the Panchayat. Okay, disability. See why when we talk about this, then who is responsible to implement?
The politicians, of course.
No, we have a system. No, politicians,
Yeah.
not politicians. The politicians, they will be only busy in elections. So the government, no, at the
Yeah.
center, at the state, no, they have to work in partnership, and the real onus of responsibility is with the state governments, and especially with disability. We come to that it is a state subject and it is a panchayat trust subject. It is so important for an active involvement of the state governments. So otherwise, it would not get translated into reality. Okay. The other issue, what we want to, we need to think, maybe we can have some sleepless nights, that is okay, is like why it is happening. What is that we can do? Because we are talking of the government not playing its role. But let us also look at various other players. It could be teachers, it could be school administration, school leaders, the school betterment committee, the whole lot of ecosystem in education. We need to look at each and everyone, whether they have an intent or whether they are competent, because intent and competency is very important to make these changes. Is a very big question, whether it was Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan or with the NEP, we have the same issues, whether there's an intent, because it is very important to have a clear intent that if I decide to change something, I will somehow find the resources and capacity to change. I was just reading Swami Vivekananda this morning, and there he writes, Swamiji, like he was running 104 temperature. So when he was traveling in different countries, and he had to deliver 2 to 3 public lectures, okay, with that high temperature. Okay. But he says, I did it only because I had faith that by doing it, okay, something good will happen to the humanity. So that intent is very important. So if the intent is not very clear, so what really happens is everything becomes very superficial, no? It changes. So who can change? The real leader who can change. I feel the teacher is the queen in the classroom. She is the emperor. What is that? The emperor of the school classroom kingdom. Okay. What she can do? She can do a lot. She can do a lot. All that she need to decide is, I want to do it. If she, and there are a host of people who can support her how to do it. But if she doesn't decide to, she may bring out changes, any amount of capacity building training programs, Swayam portal, Diksha portal, all that she will see as a burden to undergo all these training programs. So,
But one more thing is, only a single teacher cannot make all these changes. That is what is the problem we are facing, because the administration also has to give their support, and all the colleagues also have to support.
very drop in the emotion matters. See, she may not do the way she would do when she has support of everyone, but any effort, any positive effort is bound to give results. That is the Karma Yoga theory. It will never go waste. Have faith, because I have, from my own experience working in the rural areas, sometimes there won't be anyone even to sit and listen to us. So I would have spoken only to the wall, but will it will yield results. So that is the power of good intention. Good intention will bring a lot of changes. I'll just take you through
Sure, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
he talks about. So just to give an idea, uh, anyway, I'm very happy to share with you that I'm part of developing national guidelines for NEP for 2030. All these concerns, what I'm speaking from heart, I have tried to put into the guidelines. Okay. So you will, when you see that, you will see the real voice of the child, the real voice of the parent, and the concerns of the teacher is reflected. So please, when it is on public domain, please read it and give suggestions. Criticism, comments, okay, they are there. But what we need in India is very supportive suggestions to strengthen that. So it is going to be soon on public domain. I request each one of you to suggest how we can make the guidelines better one. So you have seen can you see the slides? Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
So, of course, in inclusive education, we see it as a new horizon for all children, especially for children with disabilities, because for the first time, the education of children with disabilities was divided between two big elephants. One is Ministry of Education, the other was the Ministry of Social Justice, and inclusive education was under Ministry of HRD, or now Education Ministry, and special education was under the social justice, and the same story at the state level. Inclusive education was in education department, special education was in either women and child or disability welfare department. So this breaking a child into two pieces was the most, uh, I would say, most irrational thing that we have done so far. So in NEP, it says no, education, whether it is special or not so special, home-based or NIOS, whatever may be the learning center and the setting, education rights, we will look at inclusion in all the settings for all children with disabilities. That is what NEP says, and that is what the implementation guidelines makes a focus on that. So, if with this background, we have to really look at say whether the inclusive education can be an entry point to improve our existing education system. UNESCO says inclusive education should be seen as an entry point to improve the existing education system, because all that we would be talking in inclusive education is a child-centered, child-supportive learning environment where all children will learn with the global learning technologies, where children will learn irrespective of their diverse pace of learning and diverse potential. So this is what UNESCO talks about inclusive education. If that is true, if that is true, every practice of whatever we call in inclusive education, it should benefit all learners, whether learners are from scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, girl child, transgender, disability, no disability, all children, all children. So that is the main question that one need to ask now in the classroom. Whatever I do in my class, that is as a teacher I am asking myself, or if it is a project director for education, they should ask whatever they are doing in the in promoting education, whether it is going to benefit all learners. If the answer is yes, then it is inclusive education. If answer is no, then it is not inclusion. So this is the main question, that it should benefit all. This benefit all is not giving the same uniform, same examination, same evaluation procedures. No, it has to be tailor-made. That is where the equity stands. The equity is the fundamental principle of NEP. So it is based on the firm foundation of equity. Equity and inclusion. Equality and equity are different. So equity is something, as I said, we can compare that to a tailor-made garment. Equality is like a ready-made. No, you go plus size or minus XL, you buy something and you try to fit into the dress. So what we need in inclusive education is a need-based, a child-centered curriculum, a child-centered pedagogy, a child-centered practices, and a very deeply child-centered attitude of teachers and the society. So here is a joke in say Mohan 8 was rejected in admission in a special school because he could see partially, and again he was rejected admission in mainstream school because he could not see fully. This is the current status of inclusive education. because there is no clarity on this, because it is divided into two ministries and two departments. So no child should get rejected, because we follow zero rejection policy in inclusive education. So we have to really look into that. A teacher in a school in Chintamani is a small village near Bangalore. So she says she had a no, she felt disabled children learn better than other children. So such myths and wrong conceptions is highly prevalent among teachers about children with disabilities. Like all blind persons can sing well, as if people sing from eyes. Okay, so this is something like earlier we could see that children who were visually challenged, they learned music as a compulsory subject. It is ridiculous. It is ridiculous, but it happened. But now we need to wake up and move on. A parent in a village at BR Hills said, when I asked them in an impact study, they said, "Madam, we send our daughter to school when there is no useful, important work at home." So, and they knew that going to school was a waste of time. No? They were very sensible parents. So, when I went, this child was at home, and they said, "No, there's a lot of useful things to do at home today. She is not going." When there is nothing much to do, then we send her to school. In Coimbatore. So I went to a school, and I could not see any children under this so-called IEDC scheme. And I asked the headmaster, "Where are the children?" They said, "The teacher is getting married. Their teacher is getting married. Their teacher is getting married." And I said, "Who is their teacher?" They said, "IED teacher." So there was a label to the teacher, and IED teacher was getting married. So instead of wasting time coming to school, I have asked him to stay at home. So this is the headmaster saying uh, very clearly about that these children are not my responsibility. There is an IED teacher, and if they come to school, let them come to school. If the IED teacher is not there, then they need not come to school. No, why waste time? No, that is what I liked about the honesty when we asked these teachers. So this is the reality. Of course, UNESCO says, and most of the global knowledge also says, that all classrooms are inclusive. All children with diverse needs are included by default because of compulsory enrollment, or sometimes by design, by reservation or policies to include children with scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, and children with disabilities, transgender, and so on. So every classroom is a mixed classroom. Either a teacher is equipped to manage an inclusive classroom, or we have to make some alternative arrangement. And many times we see parents and teachers opting for open school, national open school, NIOS, instead of regular schools, because regular schools are not prepared. Because in NIOS, at least the parents and some supportive teacher, so you see a large number of children with disabilities opting for alternative system rather than going to the traditional school. If we wait for children to fail, I feel that is a very gross injustice. So that is what happens in inclusive education. Like if there is no support system, they drop out even when they reach the 7th or 8th, or they fail when they reach the 10th. And the whole system is we wait for the child to fail, and that should change. And we have to really look at what are the factors which is causing failure, and we have to make decisions to correct those adequately with a robust system, so that a child should not fail. A child will fail only when the system fails. So if we really look at disabilities within the system, then we can bring about changes. Inclusive education, if you see the NEP, they put it in 5 pillars: equity, quality, affordability, accountability, access. All looks great. Okay. And by following this, of course, we really crossing the divide is possible. So we need to really look at whether this can be translated at the classroom level. NEP talks about recognizing, identifying, fostering the unique capabilities of each student. And this each student and moving towards holistic development, and the focus on a curricular approach rather than a disability approach in education is a very big game changer in NEP. So if it gets really translated into action at the classroom level, not at the paper level, then we can really see a lot can happen. NEP also looks at some of the key issues. Accessibility, not constructing the bad ramp, but looking at accessibility in all school experiences. It could be, say, accessibility in terms of social inclusion, emotional inclusion, and inclusion in learning, and inclusion in diverse open activities. Of course, NEP doesn't distinguish between open curriculum and closed curriculum, but it looks at the entire school life. There, it has to be accessible. And facilitating and sustaining the learning journey of every student should be a focus on inclusive education. So we have to do a lot of child tracking, whether they are in the same school or whether they leave the school, whether they migrate and go to the other school. Right now, we don't have any focus. We need to really focus on that. So what is the goal? Of course, even if they go for 10 years of schooling or 12 years of schooling, you should make a person independent and self-reliant. So someone said about the skill development, I think that will bring in a strong base if children are within the 12 years of schooling, walk away with skills to lead life with dignity. Student growth, while emphasizing the role of the community of teachers, so partnership with the community becomes very critical. Even with illiterate parents, we have to find ways, new ways and means of having meaningful partnership with parents, not just educated, irrespective of their socio-economic, educational background. The school has to build the partnership. All this is said in NEP guidelines, but how do we really go forward and do it? Unless the whole issue about say taking the NEP inclusive education and looking at all children, not just children with disabilities, and having a special focus on the socially economically disadvantaged groups who have become an integral part of the education system, accountability, all that is very well said in NEP, but the music begins when the school starts practicing. So the real music begins when the school adopts this approach and says, okay, this is the road, this is the Google map, and my classroom is my car, and I will fill the fuel, and I know where the steering is and where are the gears, whether the brake works or not. So if a teacher and the school ecosystem works as a school, as a unit, we can bring some changes. Since we have shortage of time, I would not go with the details of NEP. All that I would say is, with the existing system of using resource teachers, peripatetic teachers, itinerant teachers, all these models has not worked in India because of scattered population and villages, where we still have 76% of people with say disabilities live in rural areas. So we need a different approach. So what is the different or sensible approach is to treat all teachers as inclusive teachers. So just forget about all this visiting teachers, visiting experts, resource teachers and all that. It has not worked. Most of the studies shows that it has not worked. Of course, the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, UNESCO, they themselves have done an excellent report, and it shows very clearly at the ground level, it doesn't work. So what works is to treat every teacher as an inclusive teacher and every classroom as an inclusive classroom, whether it's a private or a government or a semi-government or experimental school, whatever it could be, like every learning environment. I would not call it a school. Every learning environment should be inclusive. So I give some data if those are interested. Like if we go with the existing approach, we need a big huge army of trained teachers, and that may take another 400 to 500 years for us to achieve. So we need to really look at build on what low-lying fruits and what is achievable, what is reachable, and that is a humble school. It is bad, we know that. Teacher, she is not competent, we know that, but that is all we have, and we have to build on that. And for that, we need to have faith in her, faith in that system, and build the capacity. That becomes very important. So I have done some analysis, but I will not go into details. That the existing approaches, if NCT, RCI keeps on putting their spokes and allow inclusive education, not to flow like a Ganga river, but becomes a stagnant water, then there is no future for inclusive education. So this, I hope and see that regulatory bodies will be more flexible, more open, and allow the universities, boards, state governments to develop their own need-based mechanisms for human resource development, but not strangulate the system with the rules and regulations with too much of policing. Here I would like to quote Prime Minister, we need the regulations which is light and tight, but not so much of penalties, imprisonment and all that. What is it we are talking? We are not even, we are not ready, and even if we are ready, we don't need policing in education. We need more facilitating. So that culture has to change. We don't need regulatory bodies, but we need more facilitating bodies. I would like to stop my presentation here and open up for a few more questions since we have shortage of time. So you can fight with me, you can agree with me, you can disagree with me, you can do whatever you want. So this is my view about inclusive education. This is what I have understood, that it is no monkey's business. So if we have to have a firm faith in what we have, and we have to build on that humble school with a humble teacher, competent, okay, but we need to build on that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, the floor is open for questions. I did see some hands raised in between, so you can please unmute yourself and speak if you wish to. There was one question on the chat, ma'am, when you were talking about how the teachers agency and the other stakeholders. There was a question asking about students agency in the whole system.
I don't understand. Can someone, whoever asked, can you ask me? Please open up your video so that I will be able to see.
Someone, yeah, Ravinder, Mr. Ravinder or someone. Yeah, please.
See, the question is, see, adults are deciding what the student should learn, how the student should learn. The question is more on to what extent are the students themselves are involved in the teaching process, or what they should be taught, or how they should be taught. That's the question.
See, when we use the term child-friendly, child-centered, so whether we ask children, whether we, they talk about a choice-based cafeteria approach in education. It is like if you go to a cafeteria, the Darshini, you will have so many things to choose if you want to eat breakfast. So NEP promotes that they have dismantled the walls between science, commerce, arts, and all that. Okay, the child can choose and jump from one discipline to another, and they can make a combination. That is what, say, choice-based cafeteria approach. The whole issue is about all that is on paper. Unless it is implemented, unless it is reviewed, unless there are very clear cut indicators and outcomes, and there is also public audit, because that is something very important. What I see in what we lack in in inclusive education is Either the government prepares the report, or UN organizations, they come and prepare a report. Okay. Where is the participatory reporting coming from? So we don't see reports prepared by parents. We don't see reports prepared by children, because they are the primary stakeholders. We don't ask them, no, what is that the school is doing? What is that is happening? We don't have them at all. So this, as you, of course, you are all very learned people. In some countries, they have the system of student evaluating the teachers. It's very important. So the teachers work hard to get better grades by students. I feel it is very important for us to bring the whole reporting system very transparent, very participatory, and the primary stakeholders. Us children, they are going to direct how the education system should be in India. So never underestimate them. No? That is something very important. NEP talks about the intent. So we are happy with that intention. But practice, who is going to practice it is a very big question. As I said, in our federal system, it has to be state governments, it has to be panchayats, it has to be the STMC committees, it has to be the school governance. They are all responsible, so they need to do it. They are accountable to the child, so child should be able to ask questions like, why you are not doing this for me? So we need to have more adalats by his children. Then they will pass good judgments, and then it becomes more implementable. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I think you said a very right thing on the feedback from the students. But it becomes difficult, they get fearful of the teachers' assessment of themselves, maybe in the subsequent class. But a follow-up question would be, in terms of when you said there's a cafeteria menu kind of a system that the student can choose, what about the age grouping? See, it's not necessary that a certain age group have the same level of intelligence level. So is there a freedom, or do you think there should be a freedom that they could mix in a particular interesting subject and the knowledge level or the curiosity level or the capability level, like you were mentioning about, rather than be segregated into, this age group falls into such kind of an intelligence level, a particular age group falls into a different intelligence level.
We need though I feel this cafeteria approach and giving freedom to the child to choose what it wants to do, all that needs a lot of resources. So right now I feel we are like a small, dabba shop on the roadside where where he will give you 2 idli, 1 vada, and that has to be your breakfast. You have no other option. So right now we are in that state. So we to give that resources, then there has to be substantial enhancement in the budgets. Otherwise, in reality, it would not happen. So, but we all need to work, because not that it's, whether without money we cannot achieve, because a lot can be achieved without money. At least we can start with that. No, make a list of things that can be achieved without money or without too much money, and then move towards this, especially with assistive technology. Because since we are also looking at children with disabilities, assistive technology and accommodation can play wonders. They can play such a wonder that we don't even need teachers. They are that supporting, but it is not there. We still talk about braille slates. We still talk about, very basic, large print materials. What really happens is, if you have to bring in that, okay, then we have to, because India being an IT capital, we should really ask all our IITs and engineering colleges to develop a technology which should benefit India and also others, because technology is, can do wonders. So we need to really work on that. But the relationship between the parent and the school, it is like snake and mongoose. Like all parents, they say, they hate and they fear a parent-teacher meeting, because if a child is not learning, school blames the parent. If the child misbehaves, the school blames the parent. If the child gets into some bad things, the school blames the parent. this blaming the parent. Of course, sometimes fathers, they skip the meetings, they are very wise. The mother, no, she has to take a lot of it, from the school. They said that they get very stressed by this parent teacher meeting. So where is the meaningful partnership, between the parent? Of course, I can see in chat box they say that they have children evaluating teacher support system and parent feedback system. It is fine. So let us really strengthen it, not just as a tokenism, but as a meaningful one, And by just me talking, it is not going to happen. But some teacher in some remote village, if they decide, they can bring in changes. But we have seen in some of the schools like CFL, Valley School, I have seen such changes happening in a very informal way, where the parent and teachers, they form the community and they work in small numbers. But I really feel that we need to work on that. There are no simple solutions. Any other question?
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
So girls only school, yeah. Girls only school. I also went to a girls only school. I always felt I should have gone to a co-education school during my high school days. So what, whether the girls only school is, I don't know the question, but whether it is a girls only or say a co-education school, we can bring inclusive education, in a meaningful way. It always helps to have diversity. Even both genders also add diversity. So I would see from that angle. But don't quote me. If people are conservative, they may not like it. But I feel having diversity, because the world is diverse, the planet is diverse. So we need to really celebrate diversity. I don't know the question, but if that is the intent, that is my response. Okay, any other question?
May I, ma'am?
Yes.
Ma'am, I don't have any question on this NEP, but rather I'm very positive and hopeful, because if we see the earlier two policies were never discussed as much as this NEP 2020 had discussed, thankfully for the pandemic. And earlier two policies were restricted with the policymakers and the bureaucrats or the heads, or restricted to the papers. But this NEP 2020 is it is reachable, accessible. The information is there through the discussion, through the workshop, and so even the teachers also who are also now aware of this policy. Yes, the changes will take time, slowly, maybe 10 years, 15 years, but now teachers have understood that there are such policies, and the government want the changes from the in the school, for the students and in the society. So and they are supporting, the policy makers are supporting, heads are supporting. So it's teachers responsibility, society responsibilities, parents, it's overall everyone's responsibility to work on this and to bring the changes.
Right.
Thank you.
So, see, even we need not like or dislike NEP. It is perfectly all right, even if you hate NEP, that is fine. But what I would see, NEP as a document is, now we have some tool for us to bring about changes, no? Because we are all concerned about bringing changes. Here is a tool. Maybe there are certain things in NEP where our thinking would align, and we should work on that. So that is how I sometimes some people say, ma'am, we hate NEP. I said, which part of NEP you hate? There are no answers. So either hating NEP or supporting NEP, that is not going to help. But NEP, if you read NEP, there are things which may, where your thinking, your ideas, your say beliefs align with NEP. And NEP, you can always add to NEP. So it is not a rigid document, it is an evolving document. It says very clearly. So you can always add to NEP and add strength. When they say that, it is very important for us to see that how to use NEP. NEP is like a tool, no? It's like a pair of scissors. How we are going to use the scissors, it depends on us. If we don't use the tool, then it is a waste. So it is a Google map, it is a pair of scissors. So without using it, it is useless. That is what I wanted to convey.
Right, ma'am. Thank you.
Professor Gomati,
Yeah, I'm here, ma'am. Anyone else who would like to ask any questions? Or
I will type my email ID. Okay, if they want to know more about inclusive.
yes, ma'am, that would be great. That would be great. And in fact, I would really like to thank ma'am for actually, giving us such valuable insights about very trivial matters that are very significant with respect to inclusive aspects. Then we may have a dichotomy in terms of looking at inclusive only as a disability thing, and how ma'am has actually opened up the whole umbrella of that inclusion with respect to the diversity even in a normal or a regular school. That was really good. I would like to emphasize certain points which ma'am actually brought out here regarding equity and the slight thin line between equity and equality, how we need to actually focus and emphasize on equity in education. And the intent, in fact, we are all today, after hearing ma'am's talk, would go with an intent of actually bringing a social just environment, a classroom environment, or the school environment, or a social just environment in education. The intent and the competencies that we need to focus on, even if there is a system which talks about inclusiveness, what is the kind of intention that you carry, and how much intention a teacher actually carries and executes that kind of intention in a classroom. That also is very, very important when you look at the inclusive aspects and what is achievable. And someone spoke about how the system, the administration and all probably create some kind of hindrances or do not facilitate, but what little best can be achieved, what is achievable and reachable within one's own arena is also very important to bring out that inclusive aspect. The mantra that I will follow the child and I will not tell the child to follow me, that was something very catchy, ma'am. Yes, we all need to take that mantra with us. I will follow the child, and the choice-based cafeteria system of child-centered education, and specifically as teacher educators, how the teacher education curriculum itself should focus on a child-centered curriculum. We are all preparing teachers for different competencies, but we need to prepare teachers for that kind of intention, for that kind of being a humble teacher, by that kind of being a teacher who has that intention to bring a kind of inclusivity in the kind of environment she's dealing with or the kind of students she's dealing with. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you for bringing in all those aspects, and we look forward to reading your guidelines and enriching that guidelines with the kind of suggestions that we may come across from the field experiences and our own experiences. Very, very thank you to spare your valuable time to give our kind of this talk and open up various valuable insights. Very thank you. Tata Institute thanks you a lot. Professor Maithili, on behalf of Maithili, I'm very thankful and grateful to you for sparing your time, ma'am.
Thank you. I have a lot of admiration for Professor Maithili. So I'm really happy. It's not my guideline, it is the Government of India guideline, which is...
Definitely your contribution to that. We salute your contribution to that, and we will look forward to that guidelines, ma'am.
So let us begin, say today, the change begins with us.
Yes.
Talk matters. Let us all work together. So that is
yes.
very important. Let us work, and I'm sure together we can. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, all of you, and for joining the session today. And we will come again to soon in another month's time with another session of Vartalap. We have not yet finalized on the theme of the session. We'll coordinate with you and communicate to you soon. Thank you so much.